APSIS, the first book in the Adventures of the Empyrean Guard series, by E. W. Barnes, narrated by the author. Episode 3, Emergency Exit. Jonas admired Fulgar for not saying, "I told you so," as monotonous days turned into dreary weeks. Ostensibly, their convoy job was to provide backup and support if transport ships were damaged or disabled en route. In reality, it was little more than babysitting, as Fulgar had feared. But monotony did not mean downtime, because their other job was to protect the transports, until help arrived, if they were attacked by marauders. "Marauders?" Jonas asked at their first briefing. "Ships that prey on other ships," Zadok answered. "Usually ones that are smaller and less well-armed." "Pirates," Nizhoni said. "You're talking about pirates." "Space pirates," Jonas laughed. "That could be interesting." Unfortunately, despite constant alert readiness, nothing interesting happened, and days of boredom began to run together. The routine never wavered. After they met their assigned transport ships at the Outer Forces Depot, the convoy group would enter one of the conduits, dark matter filaments left over from the formation of the galaxy, Merlina had explained. Within the conduits, a spaceship equipped with a conduit engine could achieve faster-than-light travel. But faster-than-light was not instantaneous. Restless hours, sometimes days, would pass before they emerged at their destination, an area of outer Union space called the Outskirts. Once a convoy group was safely delivered, the Empyrean Guard would either escort transport ships back to the Outer Forces Depot or make the return journey alone. Their ship was the OFS Obata. The first time he boarded her, Jonas noticed a musty smell, as if she had not seen service in a while. Classified as an escort vessel, the Obata was small, with 3 cabins, a mess hall, a bridge, and an engineering section. Unlike transport ships, the Obata had windows, though there was rarely anything to see but blackness when traveling through the conduits. The Empyrean Guard split their time in 2 shifts of teams of 3. Wanting the team to remain flexible and cohesive, Zadok persuaded Ira to set up a rotating schedule that allowed them to work with different team members over time. That helped with the monotony, but not by much. There was no shore leave, only a day off after every 4th full convoy run, to be spent at the depot, an aging, grim space station with few amenities and no character. Not long after convoy duty started, Jonas and Nizhoni visited the depot recreation area, but were forced to leave almost as soon as they arrived, when station personnel harassed them about the Coudet incident. A recent skirmish between Outer Forces and Inner Coalition ships resulted in several injuries aboard the Outer Forces cruiser Natio, raising tensions even higher. "Are you trying to get us split up?" Nizhoni hissed as she dragged Jonas out the door after breaking up a shouting match between Jonas and one of the depot's maintenance engineers. "No," he grated as he worked to control his shaking hands. "You get into a fight, they'll never return us to critical service." Jonas tried to keep the irritation out of his voice. "I know." Nizhoni impatiently pushed strands of hair out of her face. To pass the time during runs, Ira had been teaching Nizhoni how to weave tight braids like her own, but Nizhoni's hair did not always stay put, often resulting in a soft brown halo around her head. "I understand how you feel," Nizhoni said as they neared the airlock. "It's hard to just take it when we know we did the right thing." "It's not only that," Jonas muttered. "Fighting would somehow make it better?" "Yeah," he laughed to himself. "But I don't know if I want to win or lose." "You're not the only one feeling that way," she sighed. "Don't tell Fulgar what happened," she warned. "He's looking for a fight these days. Why do you think Ira wouldn't let him join us?" "I won't tell anyone," Jonas agreed. Nizhoni told Ira, though, because afterwards Zadok set up a timetable for when the mess hall would be used for eating, recreating, and physical exercise, a schedule clearly designed to keep them on the Obata. When he could no longer stand the scuffed walls of the now multi-purpose mess hall, Jonas used his cerebral translation, communication, and neurodata device implant, SEATS for short, to relieve the tedium. His SEATS gave him virtual access to a diverse range of Outer Forces games and entertainment, but mostly he read about the history of the Outer Union and its on-again, off-again war with the Inner Coalition, about the sapient species at the heart of the galactic conflict, and about the death of Earth, the planet on which he and Nizhoni had been born. Not many knew that last part. The fact that Jonas and Nizhoni had traveled into the future from billions of years in Earth's past was kept secret because time travel was outlawed in the Outer Union. The members of the Empyrean Guard were aware, of course. Jonas and Nizhoni's arrival in the future was the reason for the mission into Inner Coalition territory that ultimately landed the Empyrean Guard on convoy duty. It was hard not to feel guilty about the outcome of the operation, but it had been crucial to save the past. Even after all that has happened, Jonas thought as he placed the remains of his lunch in the mess hall recycler, he did not regret his decision to remain in the future with the Empyrean Guard. Ira, Zadok, and Nizhoni entered the mess hall, where Jonas and the others waited to start their shift. "Sex, we're up!" Fulgar boomed. Sex was Fulgar's shorthand for secondary team, Zadok's designation for the night shift. Fulgar thought the nickname was hilarious. So did Jonas, at first. As time went on, it had begun to wear, and he guessed Merlina was tired of the joke too, by the way she clicked her beak. "Anything to report?" Merlina asked as Nizhoni sat across the faded table from her. "All is well," Zadok answered. "The transports reached Novia safely, and we're on our way back to the depot." "Are we escorting anyone on the return trip?" "Not this time. Beta Transport experienced a malfunction in their waste system. We were assigned to return the core module to the depot." He paused, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "It's currently taking up most of the engineering section." "I bet that spells nasty," Fulgar guffawed. "We have entered the conduit, and the ship is on autopilot," Zadok continued, ignoring Fulgar. "Have a good shift," Nizhoni said for the umpteenth time as Jonas, Fulgar, and Merlina left the mess hall. The members of the secondary team arrived on the bridge, reporting to their usual stations. While Zadok and Ira trained Jonas and Nizhoni on all ship's functions, when Jonas was teamed with Fulgar and Merlina, Fulgar always piloted, and Merlina handled navigation and communications, leaving Jonas to monitor the sensors. Fulgar and Merlina insisted it was to help him better understand space travel, but Jonas suspected they gave him the assignment they found most boring. Jonas stood next to his console, loath to sit in the same place and do the same thing again. Fulgar frowned at the autopilot settings. Merlina grumbled as she reviewed the latest communications. It had been a while since Jonas had heard her use one of her fancy words. Tedious and soul-sucking. That's how Fulgar had put it. Jonas now understood exactly what he meant. Jonas looked out the bridge viewport. As usual, there was not much to see. It was mostly black inside the conduits, though today there were streaks of dark red, the color of old blood. They reminded him of the deep red glow of a time travel shift far into the past, the painful kind. He shook himself back to the present and took his seat. As if in sympathy, the Obata shuddered under him. "What do you got?" Fulgar asked over his shoulder. Jonas scanned his console. "It's reading as conduit fluctuations." "Nothing to worry about," Merlina said. Jonas eyed her doubtfully. Through the viewport, the density of the blood-red streaks increased. The Obata shivered again, a continuing tremor that soon escalated to a rhythmic bucking. "More conduit fluctuations?" Jonas asked, clenching his jaws to keep his teeth from snapping together as the ship lurched. "You tell me," Fulgar said, raising his voice. I'm not sure. The sensor readings are confusing." "Merlina!" Fulgar barked as the rocking increased. "Filament decay!" Merlina croaked. The feathers on the top of her head rose and her voice rasped with alarm. "A section has rotted. It's too large to pass through." Gone was Fulgar's easy humor. "Understood," he replied crisply. "Prepare for immediate exit." "What's filament decay?" Jonas asked. "The conduits are very old," Merlina answered. "Beyond ancient. Eventually they become unstable, and when that happens, we can no longer use them for space travel. We must exit the conduit and re-enter at a stable section." She turned to Fulgar. "All systems ready." Fulgar toggled a switch. "Prepare for emergency deceleration." His voice resonated through the ship. "This is going to be tricky," he muttered to himself. "Tricky how?" Jonas asked. "It's dangerous to travel through a decayed section," Merlina answered as she secured herself in her seat. "There may not be enough time to exit safely before we hit the instability." Following Merlina's lead, Jonas strapped himself in. "What happens if we reach the decayed section before we exit?" "The same thing that will happen if we exit too early," Fulgar growled. "If the ship doesn't disintegrate, you'll be pulverized against a bulkhead," Merlina said. "Okay, here we go," Fulgar called out. The ship juddered. There was a low rumble that seemed to come from under the deck, accompanied by an unpleasant whine. Jonas braced against the pull and push of inertia as Fulgar deftly maneuvered the ship. His eyes were half closed, and he appeared to be measuring the distance from the decayed section and the location of the ship through only his hands on the controls. The Obata felt like a rock skipping across the surface of a pond. "Come on," Fulgar muttered encouragingly to the ship. "Come on." Jonas could have sworn there was a popping sound as they emerged from the conduit. The rumbling ended, and the whine faded away. "We made it?" Fulgar grinned at him. "We made it, kid, and in one piece. Almost," he added. "There's minor damage to the propulsion system. Nothing Zadok can't fix." Merlina tapped her beak on her console. "I've noted the coordinates and prepared a decay report for HQ." Jonas exhaled as he loosened his restraints and activated his console. "We've lost sensors," Jonas announced. "They'll be back online soon, but until then, I can't tell you what's out there." "We don't need sensors to tell us what's out there," Fulgar said in a tense voice. Jonas looked up. Gone was Fulgar's smile as he stared out of the viewport. Jonas followed his gaze and gaped. An enormous dark mass dominated the view. A ship hung in front of them. A gigantic bulk that cast a vast shadow against the stars, bristling with projections Jonas assumed were weapons. The only way Jonas could think of to describe it was mean-looking. "Pirates!" Merlina squawked. "Hang on, kids!" Fulgar boomed, his voice gleeful. "Things are about to get interesting."